Going on, Jab Jab Talk Nation. It's your host, Ozil, and we're going to do something a little different today. And this was inspired by a conversation I just had that we weren't supposed to go there, but we went there. And because he's a fight fan, and he just also understands our love, our passion for the sport of boxing. I was like, you know what? I'm going to press record. We're going to do something different because I was supposed to record a solo show to share with you guys my thoughts on last night's, for lack of a better, last night's fight between Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. Let's just call it that. We're not going to get too much about Netflix because if you guys watched it, it was just a hot mess. Brian, who I have here, my friend, the fight fan here, our guest, said, what'd you call it? America Online, AOL?
I believe I alluded to the idea of what everybody experienced last night from the streaming of Netflix was the equivalent of an AOL dial-up. So it was a little bit of nostalgia.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're going to make this one a short one because we have to record something else after this. But for our Jab Jab Talk Nation, I want to just briefly kind of, Brian, go ahead and just give a small recap of kind of your thoughts. You're coming from, I'm going to get some context. You come from an MMA background. Like, that's your passion. That's what you watch. You're into it. You talk about it on your podcast as well. I will make sure that we link that up in the show notes. But talk to us about your thoughts on last night's fight between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson.
Well, I appreciate that, my friend Ozil. First of all, I'll just say that what I'm going to start off with is recapping a few things I heard from last night to this morning, and then I'll give you my final analysis on everything. To begin with, I was one of the few that did not tune in to the fight itself on Netflix. I was tuning in to a live streaming of MMA analyst and I guess you can say journalist Luke Thomas. So Luke Thomas has been covering MMA fights and boxing for a considerable amount of time now, and he was going live last night, and I was watching what he had to say. I don't know why. I just kind of chose to go that route, and I had some other things on in the background with the family because I'm a teacher by day and a podcaster by weekend, just throwing that out there. So I was probably grading papers and had something else on in the background. But I had Luke Thomas playing, and Luke Thomas was extremely frustrated, like everybody else was, that was not in attendance for AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, which is my backyard. If you attended that, you missed nothing. You missed none of the, and I'll say it in asterisks, the theatrics of last night. So to begin with, what I kind of broke down and did some, watching back of the highlight reels is most of the fights that led up to Jake Paul and Mike Tyson were art. And I feel like from a moral standpoint, these fighters, these ladies, and these fighters, and again, if I try to say their names, I'm going to butcher them, but that's what your job is, Ozil, is to fill the gap for me on this one. Yeah, well, I'll let you do that for me. But what we saw there was actual boxing, which led up to the theatrics. And if you do an accumulation of everything from Mike Tyson showing us what was left of his posterior to all the walkouts and to the first two rounds of this fight, and this is what Luke Thomas analyzed and what I kind of caught on the back end, was that Tyson did come out swinging in the first two. And if you look at the last 8 rounds, even Jake himself said in the post-conference words that you don't want to say in the world of boxing because you slapped a lot of people in the face. You said, I carried him. Because I started to let off the gas. He said something to this degree of I started to see that he wasn't engaging as much, and I felt like I don't need to. Again, that sounds like a lot of contractual cover-up in my mind, and that's just I have no proof of that except just to say what were the negotiations beforehand. So ultimately this morning when I woke up after I saw all the theatrics were over and all the dust had settled, Ariel Helwani came out, and that's another MMA analyst who said kind of what I'm talking about now, is that he called this fight and said that Jake is going to win. And I told you earlier how I felt about this. I felt like, in a political sense, I felt like a Democratic Party representative who was screaming at the top of my lungs and nobody was listening that Donald Trump is going to win re-election. And I hate being right. to say that in the same sense is I stood on back home at the Blockhead Mansion and I typed into my Facebook for anybody who would listen that Jake Paul is going to win this fight because this is a lose-lose for him in every way. If he knocks out Mike Tyson in the first round, the whole world is ticked off. If he knocks him out by the 5th round, even midway through, the world is ticked off and you've become the villain. If we go all the way to a unanimous decision and some start to cry foul, what this builds up to is something known as a rematch. And if you look at all of the metrics and you look at all of the dirty money that has run through boxing for a long period of time, post Mike Tyson's prime, you will realize that the rematch is always where the money lies. And so when I look at this, I see the one who benefited the most is the industry itself. The fans got nothing out of this. Mike Tyson got a nice payday, but that's about all I can say for it.
Yeah.
Jake Paul got double the revenue for that, which means he doesn't have to work another day in his life if he doesn't want to. But my answer to all of it is what we saw was theatrics. What we saw was a shell of Mike Tyson's former self, and it is hard to say that for one of the strongest hitters in the history of this sport that used to be more legit than it is now. When you can take a YouTuber and pelt him to the height of success, writing a marketing strategy, it is hard to defend the sport as a whole. So I hope that answers your question, Ozil, that I stood in the back and said, he's going to win. And I don't like it because controversy sells. That is my analysis. Take it for what you will.
Here are my thoughts. And thank you, brother, for sharing that. Here are my thoughts on the fight. And I haven't quite gathered up like everything. Like I'm looking at it from different angles. Right? You and I talked about like our thoughts when Jake Paul kind of started getting into the sport of boxing and how we weren't really big fans of that. And then seeing him, take on ex-MMA fighters and champions and watching him, train with real boxing trainers. Okay, so I'm going to go all over the place with this one. Fight directly. What are my thoughts? It was an utter buzzkill, and I was a victim of the optics. I actually was one of those that I saw the reels and I thought, man, yes, this is a Tyson that's close to 60. Definitely not. I wasn't expecting to see the Tyson that we all know of, but I was expecting Tyson, especially with everything leading up, the press conference, the slap, everything, the hype was there. And there was a part of me, a big part of me, Brian, that I was like, okay, we may see just a real, like just a legendary, iconic boxer like Tyson dig into his past, just dig in, just and pull up some fuel out of his old school, like just boxing skill set and just do just a little bit, 1% of it come out. And that could be enough to destroy Jake Paul. I was hoping that we would see something from Mike Tyson. I was like, man, if you just go out there 1%, 5%, just give us a little bit, Tyson. You can school this kid and knock him out. And then a lot of them were predicting, hey, he can knock him out 1 or 2 rounds if he lands a hook and the uppercut. Right. So we were thinking of that. So the glory days. But even at this age, when I was looking at the reels, I'm like, this guy is training. We may see something really spectacle. It might be special. Like the old man really whooping up this YouTuber who thought that he could actually box. And I was really going for that. So he got me. Like I was sold on the optics. I was sold on the presentation, the great marketing campaign that they both ran, the buildup, the slap, everything. And then the fight starts. And I'm seeing, Tyson, do the peekaboo and move. And you're seeing, I was like, okay, all right, he's got some movement in there. And he's landing a couple shots. And you can tell Jake Paul was in survival mode. And I'll talk about his performance. And then it was like Tyson was a spark. It was a little bit of fire. And then after 2 rounds, done. And that fight just stayed flatline.
Yep.
It was one of the worst performances. It was a joke. Jake Paul, I mean, I haven't watched the post-conference. He should be ashamed of himself because if he wanted to, and regardless of whether or not, damned if you do, damned if you don't, but he could have really made it into a fight. He really could have at least pressed it. He stopped. He didn't even press it. And Tyson was like, I'm going to throw maybe 1 or 2 punches after the second round. And I'm like, what is this? And it was just a dance around for like the whole 8 fight, the rest of the 6 rounds. And I'm like, what are we watching, y'all? What is this? What is this
Unfortunately,
garbage?
yes.
So here's a few things. And it was, I kind of laughed when Mike Tyson, when they asked him about a potential, like another fight, is this the last one? He's like, well, there might be another one. I'm like, no, you need to take the money that you got, stay retired, because people don't want to see that anymore. No more Tyson. Like, I love you. I grew up watching you. I watched all your fights. No more. And I think a lot of boxing fans that are watching this can definitely relate to that. Jake Paul, I think Jake Paul is a brilliant marketer, as I mentioned. Even they were showing, like, Brian, I'm not sure if you saw, but even like the cups, I mean, it was like holographic, everything, like of Mike. I mean, they branded from bottom up this whole event,
Yes.
and they sold out the Cowboy Stadium. I mean, the fact that a YouTuber and somebody like Jake Paul can orchestrate that and put that together, I respect Jake Paul as a great marketer. He knows what he's doing. He's very calculated. And I think he basically delivered what we all expected, right? Where I'm going to pick the old man and I'm going to go ahead, and there's a high possibility. Maybe he saw something we didn't see. He may not show up, and I'm going to just dance around, and then we both get paid, and then on to the next. I did notice something that shifted towards the end, though, because when the interviewer asked him post the fight, I said, who do you want to fight? And he's like, I don't know. Like, it was almost kind of like he was probably thinking, and I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and assume that he's probably thinking, I don't want to fight a top dog. He said, well, you thought, what about Canelo? Like, you talked about Canelo. And he was like, he kind of downplayed that, right, Brian? He was like, I don't know. Like, right. Yeah, well, we'll see what's next. Because I felt like maybe there might have been a moment there where he probably was like, all right, I couldn't really beat this fighter and I didn't show up. I don't know. There was something that was very underwhelming about him. And it felt like, and he'll be back. He'll be back for another fight. But I don't know. Again, my whole thing is to encapsulate everything. Horrible fight, bad performance. Netflix, shame on you. They broke Netflix. That was something. I think that was more on the Twitter feed than anything else. It's just like Netflix, what's going on social media? What's happening? I had to watch it on a live stream, on somebody else's live stream on TikTok. But here's the thing. I was watching and I was intrigued, and I drank the Kool-Aid like everybody else. I will say this, though, Brian. You and I are very purists in the combat sport, in the sport of boxing. And I believe, yes, Ramos, you alluded to that earlier, Ramos and Mario Barrios from San Antonio, Texas, they put on a great performance. That's boxing. Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor, that was an amazing fight. That is boxing. If there's anything, I don't want to say it's destroying boxing, because if anything, it is getting the baby boomers. It's getting a really large generation watching boxing. And I think if anything, that was good for the state of boxing, is that Jake Paul is bringing attention. Now, is it the right attention? Maybe no. But is he introducing the younger generation to boxing? Yes. So I'm going to give a little bit of flowers there. I do see the positive in that. But I do feel like, take it for what it's worth, Jake Paul is simply just a spectacle. He's a great marketer that has fooled everybody to thinking he's a boxer, and he's going to continue doing that. We can criticize all he want, but he's going to continue doing the same thing until he steps in and fights a real boxer. But I think he's okay with that. I mean, the guy has shown that he's obviously likes to train. He's learned. He's gotten better. I want to say tremendously, but he's gotten better with boxing. So, I mean, I feel like he's created his own lane, so I'm not going to criticize him too much. But the last night's fight, Brian, I don't know.
That's what I've alluded to here is I don't want to come across as a pragmatist, and I don't want to sit here and say to everybody, I told you so. That's actually not it. It's everything you just talked about. The narrative that got everybody into the stadium, the narrative that got everybody to their Netflix account. But once you got it inside the boxing ring and the bell rang, there it is. It's almost like that Ultimate Warrior feel to it. Now you've seen it. Here we are. But and I even threw this out. You said something about TikTok that gives me a segue. I put up a post on TikTok that shows a picture of Homer Simpson boxing with Tyson and getting his hand raised. And that's gotten over 4,000 views in a short period of time. And I said on there that the next fight's going to be Jake Paul versus Canelo, but the stipulation is Canelo has to be 70 years old. So take all that with a grain of salt for what it's worth.
Well, listen, I mean, again, it goes back to where he is super, super calculated. And, Canelo Alvarez, and I was even thinking about this, man. I was like, Canelo Alvarez is towards the end of his career. He's also being very calculated, still find dangerous fighters, but he's very calculated within the sport of boxing. And I mean, I don't know. I was just thinking, I said, wouldn't it be crazy if, like, I think that if Jake Paul would have put on an impressive performance, even against, a 60, 58-year-old Mike Tyson, I don't know if I was thinking, it's like, I wonder if Canelo would be open to that, because Canelo is also very like, I'm closing it out, maybe for the spectacle, maybe for the money, maybe let me just go ahead and school this young kid. It would be a massive, massive fight. I think it would break records. I mean, that fight would be amazing. I mean, well, as far as attendance wise, and it would make a lot of money.
Sure.
I mean, I wouldn't be interested in seeing it. I mean, we would see Canelo demolish the kid for sure. But I wasn't even thinking about that, because Jake Paul was very open. Brian was like, "I want to fight Canelo. I want to fight Canelo." I was like, "I want," but he did not mention Canelo. I thought that was really interesting.
He was very hesitant. Yes.
Very hesitant. I was like, maybe he was doubting, like, geez, I don't, But he didn't look good, man. I was just watching him. He was moving around, and I'm like, "What are you? You don't look good." I haven't watched the post conference, and I haven't heard him say about the whole how he was carrying him. Dude, you weren't doing anything either. Like, he barely was punching both of them.
Yeah,
Like, it
I
was like,
mean,
what's up?
I don't want to put words in his mouth. I think it was just one of those, they asked him that, and it was kind of the way he responded was,
Yeah,
yeah, he didn't really start to engage in a lot. It's like, again, that's kind of letting people see you sweat at this point.
yeah,
Some people who want to dig their own grave are the ones who
yeah,
keep on talking.
yeah,
But again, we're gonna see how the cards fall at this point. But once again, what we saw leading up to the fight was boxing, but what we saw that whole time was theatrics from pillar to post.
yeah. 1000%. All right, man. Well, cool. I'm glad we're able to do this. We're talking about it. I know. No surprise that we're
Sure.
going to kind of go down the fight route, because we're both fight fans. So that was fun. All right, man. Well, Jab Jab Talk. This was fun. This was an exclusive, chat talking about a fight, post fight prediction, or actually post fight talk reaction video. So hopefully you guys enjoy that, and let me know in the comment section, what did you think about last night's fight? Do you agree with what we're saying? Do you disagree? All opinions are open inside in the comment section, so make sure you share your opinions, and make sure you like and subscribe to this little baby channel that we're still trying to grow. But again, when it comes to content of boxing, we're going to be in there. All right, so Brian, thank you so much, brother. We'll do it again.
Kaboom.
All right, peace.